Welcome back. Thanks for staying on board. John McGinnis with you, as is Steve Campora, attorney at law, who is a distinguished legal practitioner in the community and has, among his accomplishments, he has successfully on a number of occasions sued Pacific Gas and Electric. And a couple of things I want to talk about this afternoon, Steve, is first of all, how many people out there who are in harm's way, just in terms of the effects of a wildland fire or a pipe explosion or burst or something of this nature, any number of casualties that could come their way, are unwittingly underinsured or uninsured?
Most, I would say most, and particularly with regard to wildland fires because of their difficulty in getting insurance in the first place or in keeping insurance.
Just by virtue of where they live?
Exactly.
And in this last series of wildland fires, I understand that there are trees that were growing in an area that compromised the safety. Is that?
Apparently, what happened is that there was what they call a tree strike, meaning that a overhead line came in contact with a tree, which resulted in sparks and a fire up just near Jackson, outside of Jackson, California, in Amador County. And then the fire spread across the ravine into Calaveras County and burned 70,000 acres.
And the 70,000 acres, any idea how many homes?
The estimate that I've seen from CAL FIRE is 465, although that's been going up, and another 300 or 400 outbuildings, another structure.
So 465 homes, probably going to be north of that, probably 500 or in that general ballpark. How many of those folks would you estimate? Because I think it's a natural process. You find some solace when you see some devastation like that. You think, well, at least they're going to be okay because they're covered. But how many of them are not going to have and how many of them are finding that out now? They're not covered at all. They've lost everything, and I mean everything.
I would say 40% probably have no insurance at all, and most people, even if they have insurance, aren't fully covered for everything they've lost and all their damages. But there are people I know, if an 81-year-old man I know that had insurance till 5 years ago, and the insurance company came out and said, you have to cut down these trees, which he couldn't do, and he couldn't afford to have it done, and they canceled his policy, and he couldn't get insurance on property he'd lived for years and years. I mean, it's paid for.
So the insurance company, in the interest of protecting their own liability, went out and did an inspection, recognized the threat that existed because of these trees, and put forth an edict that he remove the trees in order to maintain his coverage.
Exactly.
But he didn't have the resources or the wherewithal to do that. So he loses everything. He can't be insured.
He has no insurance. He lost 2 homes and a guest home. The guest home basically survived. But the interesting part is the trees the insurance company was worried about, they're still standing.
Interesting. Now, there's also an interesting coincidence with regard to dates on this thing. This wildfire started on
September the 9th, 2015.
And the San Bruno explosion,
September the 9th, 2010.
5 years to the day.
5 years to the day after the pipeline exploded in San Bruno and devastated that neighborhood and those homes and killed those people. 5 years to the day, it appears that a PG&E overhead line has come in contact with a tree and caused a fire which destroyed more than 450 homes, killed 2 people, and has made most of Calaveras County look like a moon, look like the moon.
You know, it is such a sad, devastating thing to see. Beautiful country. Now, so what advice do you have for people who are in that position right now? If you live in that area where you have a fire-prone area and you have that challenge, what counsel can you give them now?
Number one, they need to get their policies out and find out exactly what coverages they do and don't have with regard to not only the structure, but the outbuildings, their plants, the vegetation, their personal property. All those things have limits. And if your limits aren't high enough, then you aren't going to be fully insured. And if you don't have the right coverages, you're going to have gaps in your coverage for which you won't get any payment at all. So you need to get through your policy, sit down with your agent, and go through, this is where I live, this is what the issues are, this is what I own, what coverages do I need to protect myself?
And just looking at these numbers, if you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 homes that are lost, logically that would put the population out of that at north of 1,000, I would think.
Sure.
And if you take 40% as your rough estimate, that's 400 to 500 people. I would just very rough estimate of people who will be rendered homeless without any. I mean, they got nothing, right? Assuming that everything they had was invested in that property, their transportation, all their papers and personal affairs and memories, but maybe even more importantly, their ability to continue to live. Everything they had was invested in that property.
Exactly. And because most of the people who have no insurance, their home was paid for.
Yeah, because the mortgage companies will not allow that, right, generally
Exactly.
speaking?
If you have a mortgage, you have to show proof of insurance. So the people who have lost their insurance and have no insurance, for the most part, those people own their property outright.
So you think you're set for life. You got this property free and clear. You have no obligation on it. This is where you're going to live out your years and die peacefully in the beautiful motherlode. And now that you're devastated and all that's lost. What can you do for them?
Well, not only that, John, we're going to try to that. We're investigating. We're going to follow up with PG&E. I'm working with John Arola and Steve Arola, guys I went to high school with up in San Andreas. And we're going to be investigating this fire, the cause of the fire, and finding out exactly and get PG&E's audits about all their inspections. And I mean, they've admitted that it looks like a line strike caused the fire. Now the question is, PG&E has an obligation to maintain certain distances from their lines to trees and vegetation. And the guidelines that they have to follow are just that. They're minimum requirements. And when there's situations like now where we have extreme fire danger, their duty is more. It's a greater duty. It's more important that they do a good job and keep those lines away from the trees, because this is the kind of devastation that can result. So those people who have no insurance, their remedy is to go after the third parties who caused the fire.
Yeah, to me, it's such a graphic illustration of how horrible things can get. So I'd encourage everybody, I guess probably as good counsel for anybody no matter where they live, pull out that policy and take a look at it. Talk to your agent about it. Talk to an attorney, not necessarily, I mean, you're happy to talk to people, I'm sure, but talk to an attorney maybe if it's necessary. It'd be advisable to make sure that you have the coverage you think you have. If you find what about somebody who finds themselves in a position where the circumstances would indicate that they're not insurable by virtue of what has to be done to render their property safe or insurable? What can they do?
Well, one of the things we've been talking about since this has all come up is, the government will mandate, the Department of Insurance mandates that people can get things like flood insurance and earthquake insurance. There's got to be some mechanism to allow people who have lived on property for, some of them for 40, 50 years, it's family property.
Yeah,
that they're not going to be able to get insurance so they can maintain their home and stay there. There's got to be a mechanism in place to allow them to get insurance. Yeah. And the other folks who, even those who have insurance, when they're underinsured, then they have they have the right to go after for the losses they have that aren't covered by insurance. They have the same right to go after the third parties who caused the fire for those uninsured losses.
That's a huge message. I hope people take notice of that, because it's devastating to see that people have to go through. And even if you're in the group that has adequate insurance coverage, it's going to be an emotional hit. You're going to lose those things that are very sentimental to you. You're probably never going to be completely and totally recouped. But to have to lose everything and have nothing, walking out, I mean, to think about a person well into their golden years, perhaps, in a position where they cannot. They're done. Their options are up. They're without a home. They're without the resources they need to get reestablished. It's just a terrible place to be.
I met with a lady last night who's in her 80s, and she has insurance, and they're asking her for all the receipts for all the stuff she had in her house. And she looked at me and she said, well, first of all, who keeps all their receipts? But secondly, they were in the house. Everything was in the house.
They're gone. My gosh. Steve Campora from Dreyer, Babbage, Bucola, Campora, and Wood. Is that the firm still?
Wood and Campora.
Wood and Campora. Wow. Come on, let's work things out there. We'll give it Campora and Wood.
Chris won't care.
Thanks very much, Steve. Appreciate it. As you can tell by the sound of music, that's it for me. But stick around. You got Mike Haggerty coming up next with the afternoon news. I'll see you tomorrow.